Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome or welcome back, depending on whether you tuned into any of our previous series. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you're all well and continuing to stay safe. So today is part one of the two-part instalment. Our focus for the webinar over the next 30 to 40 minutes will be considering areas we might need to shift our focus to in light of the current COVID landscape, with part two in 2 weeks' time offering some insight into real case studies about how you in your schools may have shifted the PE dial already in response to COVID. Before we get into the content, can I just remind you to keep your microphone and cameras off to save the bandwidth? We are recording this webinar and consider it a professional learning environment, so please, as we know you will, be respectful of each other and use professional language within the chat box. If you have any questions, then feel free to ask these in the chat box, where our colleagues James and Chris will do their best to answer them all. All the presentation slides will be available as a handout at the end, as will the certificates, so please don't forget to download them before you log out. Just a quick reminder, we are not here telling you what you should and should not be doing in PE. We are merely hoping to ignite some thinking and offer some insights to help you consider and shape what you feel your PE priorities are at this moment in time. Whatever you may or may not take from this webinar, please ensure you continue to follow the government, national and LEA guidance, as well as any school-specific rules that are in place. I'm Morford and I am a PE officer within the West. I'm delighted to be joined in the commentary box today by Ryan Davies, who is one of the PE officers in the North. Ryan genuinely has lots of interesting insights and ideas, some of which I know he'll share with you today. So it's been a pleasure to put this webinar together with him over the last couple of weeks. Back in the studio, we have James and Chris, who will be manning the chat box and providing some further insights at different intervals throughout the webinar. We also have Kelly and Erin as our producers, who will hopefully make sure everything runs according to plan. Finally, we do have a slightly different PE Twitter handle now, so please give us a follow. And if you feel compelled or inspired at any point to post a tweet about the webinar, then please do include us in, as we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. You'll be delighted to know that I am now going to pass over to Ryan in a moment to provide you a bit of context to the webinar. But before I do, we just want you to start sharing your thoughts and answers to this question in the chat box as we move through. So how does PE in your school currently look different to this time last year, if at all? I will be pinning the question to the chat box, but again, if you can share some thoughts and ideas, will be picked up by James and Chris when we come to them. Ryan, over to you.
Brilliant, thanks, Phil. And thank you to everybody for joining us this afternoon. Really do appreciate it. We know that a lot of you will have stayed on for a little bit longer after school or rushed home to join us, so we do appreciate you giving up your time to do so. Like Will said, welcome back if you did join us for our previous series over the summer. If you want to catch up on any of those or you didn't manage to join us last time, then all those webinars are available on the FA Learning YouTube channel on the PE playlist. So it's worth going back there, just have a look at the 8 webinars that are already on there. So what do we mean by today's title? In asking that question regarding shifting our focus in terms of our PE priorities for 2020-2021. Now, as everyone on the call tuning in will know that this is a very unique academic year, if you like, and in so many ways, and certainly from a PE context and point of view, that's probably been affected arguably more than any other subject because of the challenges pupils have faced over recent months in actually getting that physical activity time in their lives. And, just to put that into some context, I just wanted to look at some research which has recently been made available by Sport England. And I'm sure that, you're all well aware that the Chief Medical Officer guidelines state that all children should be getting 60 minutes of activity per day. And if we look at the data from last year, that shows us that just under half were actually getting that 60 minutes a day activity time. Now, I would suggest, and I would think there'll be people on the call who agree that that's probably quite a worrying stat in itself, that less than half are getting that 60 minutes activity time. However, it's even more frightening when we actually look at the 6 months leading up to the start of this academic year, when that actually dropped to 19%. And if we delve a little bit deeper, then in fact, we can see that nearly half of children are still currently getting less than 30 minutes exercise per day. And probably the most concerning stat of all is that between March and September, 13% of children were actually doing no physical activity whatsoever. And of the ones that were, over a quarter were restricted to doing that inside the house, inside the flat, because they didn't have any access to an outside space. So if we consider all that data, we want to pose that question, the title of the webinar of, do we need to shift the focus of our PE curriculum this year? And which elements do we really need to shine a light on? And what we're certainly not saying, myself and Will, is that, you throw away your current PE curriculums and, throw them out the window and start again. Because if we look at the national curriculum, which we'll delve into shortly, we are hopefully in a place to be able to adapt our own school curriculums to meet the needs of the children in front of us at this time. And some of you may have attended a recent Association for Physical Education, AFPE webinar. And we really like this quote that they said when they were discussing this issue of PE delivery this academic year, that we don't want a COVID-specific curriculum. We want a curriculum that can be adapted to COVID. And hopefully some of the things we discussed today will generate ideas on how we can actually do that. Now, before we get into it, as homeschooling became more prevalent and more PE resources became available, particularly around March, April, and over the summer, then there was much debate about what constitutes PE and that high quality version that I know we all desire and why we're all on this call this afternoon. And I know I've had this conversation with many teachers up in the Northeast who I've worked with around what constitutes that physical education, that high quality version of it. And I think this is probably a question that's worth asking ourselves at any point in time, not just at the moment, but is the PE I'm delivering, does that PE stand for physical education or physical entertainment? And, we can stand at the front of a class in the school hall and we can get the kids copying us doing exercises and star jumps, but are we really just entertaining them as opposed to actually educating them in that PE space? So with that question in mind, and in the spirit of 2020, I'm sure you've all done lots of quizzes over the last few months, where we are going to have a little quiz, and I'm going to put some extracts up from the AFPE website, and I'd like you to decide what they are defining. All right, so I'll give you some options and I'll put the extract up. So the first one is, this is part of a description about one of the following things. So recreational activities, physical education, grassroots sport, school sport, or physical activity. So structured learning that takes place within school settings. So if you just pop in the chat box, whether you think that is referring to A, B, C, D, or E. So recreational activities, physical education, grassroots sport, school sport, or physical activity. So structured learning that takes place within school settings. So if you just want to put a letter into the chat box, got a few flying in already. So quite a lot going for B as I see it coming in. Nice to see lots of familiar names in the chat box as well. A couple for D, we've got an E. Fantastic, right. So that one is part of the definition of school sport. All right, so I'll put the full definition up there for you. So school sport, structured learning that takes place beyond the curriculum, so the extended curriculum. So this is our extracurricular activities that we might do, still structured learning, still within a school setting, but beyond curriculum time, so that extended curriculum. So well done if you got that right of school sport. The next one, so this involves both learning to move, i.e. becoming more physically competent, and moving to learn. So learning through movement, a range of skills and understandings. So again, same options. Only got 4 to choose from now. School sport we've already had. So which of the following are recreational activities, physical education, grassroots sport, or physical activity is that defining? So involves both learning to move and moving to learn. So again, we've got B, E. If you're going for E. Okay, lots coming in. Give you 10 more seconds. It's very close between B and E coming in. Okay, so to give you the full definition there, that one is our PE. All right, so PE, and I've taken that extract out, involve both learning to move and moving to learn. timetabled curriculum, in-school time delivered to all pupils. All right, so last one. Let's see if anyone can get 3 out of 3. So this involves bodily movement, posture and balance, including indoor and outdoor play. So we've had PE, we've had school sports. That leaves us with recreational activities, grassroots sports, or physical activities. So bodily movement, posture and balance, including indoor and outdoor play. So we've got, A, C, or E left. Let's have a look. Lots of answers flying in the chat box. Good stuff. I think he is just shading it. Well done if you got that right. So this one was describing part of the definition of physical activity. That bodily movement, posture and balance, including indoor and outdoor play. Well done to anyone who got 3 out of 3. You can give yourself a sticker and a house point tomorrow. And like I said, all those definitions are from the Association for PE website. And this poster is available to download for free, along with lots of other useful resources on that website. So if you think having those definitions might be useful for your school up in the staff room, then head over to that website. And like I said, there's a few posters there that you can download for free. So let's delve a little bit further into the physical education definition and the reason why we're here. And I've highlighted those 2 key terms. So learning to move, developing pupils' physical competency, and also that moving to learn, that more holistic development of a child that PE can provide. And now under normal circumstances, and any of you who have joined us for previous webinars will certainly testify that we certainly advocate that holistic approach to PE and shine a light across all areas of a child's development, from that social and psychological side to the technical and physical side. However, bearing in mind the data around the significant lack of physical activity children have experienced that I presented earlier, then, we might at this time actually shine a light on, and really focus on that learning to move aspect of our curriculum based on the children's current needs. And we're going to delve into how we might do that over the next 20 minutes or so. So going from that more broader, holistic approach, shining the light on all areas of the curriculum, to really maybe focusing this academic year on that learning to move aspect because of all those statistics that I gave you earlier around the recent challenges pupils might have had in that area. So before we get stuck in, I'm just going to invite Chris and James, part of our backroom staff, just to join us with any thoughts and reflections so far, and just have a little look back at that question that we posed at the start about any differences to your current PE delivery this academic year compared to last year. All right, so thank you for all those who've had some contributions, for those who took part in our little quiz. Well done for those who got 3 out of 3. James, anything from your side in terms of notable things in the chat box so far?
A few things came through quite quickly. So some of the challenges around, for example, no changing, no indoor PE, the cleaning of equipment, which is to be expected. Some have said that PE is operating as normal indoors and outside as well. So I think obviously that highlights the context are completely different up and down the country. William had pointed out that skill development and student needs have kind of taken a focus, which is quite good to hear. And Charlotte and Barry made a point about that. It's been mostly fitness after no exercise during the lockdown period. Okay.
Anything from your end, Chris?
Yeah, similar things. Just a few things I picked up on. Thank you, everybody, for contributing to the chat. It really keeps us ticking along in terms of that interaction. So keep those coming. Matthew, Vicky, Fran, Simon had some similar answers, and they were all around what's not happening, probably. No swimming, no inter-school events, no sports, no competition. So there were lots of no's around that from them. Daniel and Laura had something around cleaning of equipment, which is not something we might have been as focused on 12 months ago as we are now, or certainly not after every lesson anyway. And then a particular relevance to the topic today, perhaps Amy, Charlotte, Barry picked up on a few things of physical activity coming in, such as Daily Mile being introduced, focusing on fitness and exercise. And then there were too many to mention around coming in dressed for PE.
Okay, good stuff. I've just picked up as well. Leslie's just put something in which I think is a great point as well around around being outside more has improved student resilience, which I think is a great point, isn't it? You know, at this time of year, I think, you know, we'd certainly probably be favouring being in the school hall if it's available, but, you know, taking them outside, and I think we have been fortunate in most of the country with the mild weather to be able to do that, but that's also improving their resilience skills as well. So fantastic stuff. Just before we go a little bit further, I'm just going to pose you another question again, just for James and Chris to pick up in the chat box. So if we really do want to have as much physical activity as possible in PE, how can we do that? And any strategies you might currently employ or you might have seen from someone in your school about maintaining that high physical activity time while still ensuring that there's learning taking place and we're not just copying exercises from the teacher or whoever might be delivering the lesson. So any ideas you've got around that, any strategies that you've got that'd be good to share with other people, and that'd be fantastic.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ryan. Again, thanks to you all for your input so far. So just to really consolidate some of the stuff that we've gone over so far and some of the stuff that's coming into the chat box. The first thing that we might need to consider our shift in focus is the design of our PE curriculum. As Ryan's mentioned, for those of you that have worked with us or seen our very first webinar, know that we are advocates of a holistic approach to child development when designing a PE curriculum. This approach is supported by the PE national curriculum, which is shown here, where we've placed the key statements from the national curriculum into the relevant corner of our FA4 corner model. We can start to see that a well-balanced curriculum that is reflective of the PE national outcomes requires children to develop skills in each of those four corners and not just that technical corner. So that, for example, that learning to pass, dribble and tackle in football for 6 weeks before moving on to learning to pass, dribble and tackle in basketball for 6 weeks, which often seems to be where most PE curriculums are currently based. So having that holistic approach to your PE curriculum might also provide you with a bit more flexibility to adapt to any situation, and not just that of COVID. So, for example, if you've had you might have a block of learning around playing fairly, then it wouldn't matter whether the activity you were delivering was football or just a physical activity, or whether you had limited space, because you just adapt the activity to suit the needs and the space that you had. Again, having this flexibility is probably really particularly relevant at this time of year when the hall is out of action because it's become centre stage for the Christmas tree and play. So again, with that in mind, our second consideration around shifting the focus, as Ryan's alluded to, is perhaps going more towards the physical corner and helping the children learn to move rather than that holistic approach. This not only have the physical benefits, but might help to limit the risk of spreading the virus via equipment, because you won't have so much equipment if you're just playing, if you're not playing a particular sport. But it'll also reduce the amount of cleaning and sanitizing that a lot of you have mentioned in the chat box of equipment that you have to do after each lesson. And shifting that focus to the physical corner might also help to combat some of those alarming stats that Ryan showed you earlier. However, we must not forget that it needs to be PE and not just physical activity or physical entertainment. And when we start to look at the PE national curriculum through a more physical lens, as we can see, and as you would expect, the physical aspect runs throughout Key Stage 1 and 2. So to demonstrate this, we have just highlighted relevant statements from the PE national curriculum that refer to the physical development in yellow. So I know in some of the conversations I have had with teachers, there is a feeling that the curriculum can sometimes seem a little general and non-specific or non-directive. So over the next few slides, we're going to drill into one of the key statements around opportunities to extend agility a little deeper, to hopefully show how this can be further broken down into smaller chunked episodes of learning. And so therefore, I'm going to go back to Ryan, who is going to share what a medium-term plan and a short-term plan might look like with a physical focus.
Yeah, so really I just want to, delve into what some of those things that Will's talked about might actually look like in a lesson within a school. I think it's all right, shining the light on that physical corner and thinking, yes, this is what we need to be doing at the moment, but realistically, what is it that actually looks like in practice? So I think it's straight away, it's important, even in these unprecedented times, to still look at the bigger picture and not just treat lessons in isolation. And, if we look at this, as might be an example from a medium-term plan, and these might be our objectives we focus on for half a term, bearing in mind the lack of physical activity and social interaction some pupils might have experienced. So those might be where we really want to develop the pupils over the next few weeks. All right. So our medium-term objectives might be these ones. So that four-corner model that Will shared with you, we might be focusing at the moment on that physical corner in terms of, as Will said, developing and demonstrating a range of agility skills to beat a defender in a game. So we're really shining that light on the agility aspect. All right. And we might also have a social focus as well for this half term or for this unit of work. Bearing in mind that some pupils might not have had as much interaction over the last 6 months as they would normally with other people. So we might have demonstrate being fair and showing respect to other people. And these will be underpinned by our success criteria. So in the physical point of view, it might be that dodging, weaving, changing speed, changing direction, all these things which help us with agility. And, from a being fair and showing respect, it might be things like being polite, being self-aware, honesty, showing kindness. And, and this medium-term plan gives us the continuity where, we aren't going to be doing throwing week 1, catching week 2, and agility week 3, just like we probably wouldn't do addition week 1, subtraction in the next lesson, and multiplication in the lesson after that in a numeracy lesson. So, this medium-term plan gives us that continuity, right? For this unit of work, we're going to be looking at agility skills to beat a defender, and we're going to be shining the light on that social side as well in terms of being fair and showing respect. And everything we do, as always, is going to be underpinned by those principles of high quality teaching and learning, the differentiation strategies and the assessment for learning strategies. And again, we've covered those in a lot of detail in previous webinars if you'd like to have a look at those in a PE context as well. So if that's our medium-term plan and there are our objectives, then on a particular day, we might have identified that the pupils are struggling with changing direction. So if we look in that top box, progress against the medium-term plan, further work's needed on changing direction to evade the defender. All right, so that might be where we're currently at in this work. And this lesson might focus on some particular success criteria to help meet those medium-term objectives. So things like keeping your head up, things like looking for space and bending your knees in a physical corner. And from a social side, we might be concentrating today on being truthful and speaking to someone in a positive manner to help us meet those medium-term objectives. And it might be that some of those social values actually, coincide, or we can use some of our school values as well that might be on your website and in your brochures, and they might form part of our medium-term objectives as well. Now, bearing in mind what we've said about maximizing physical activity time, there are a couple of strategies we might implement to help us to do this. So right at the start of the lesson, we might engage the pupils cognitively with our objectives by posing this question that I've put in the box there. So, to think about something while they're walking quietly to the hall. So from the classroom to the hall, rather than that being wasted time, if you like, then we might set them that little challenge of, can you think of an example when you have been truthful today? So if one of our objectives is about being truthful, then we're going to get them thinking about that as they're on the way to the hall. And when we get there, we aren't going to waste 5 minutes by sitting them down in front of a whiteboard, talking through objectives, because, the beauty of that, the continuity the medium-term plan brings is that they know that the lesson's going to be about agility or beating a defender. They know it's going to be about being fair. So as soon as they enter the hall, then we might ask them, right, as soon as you get there, can you start moving around like your favorite sports person, or moving around like your favorite animal, okay, depending on which class you might be working with. And once they're moving around and being active, already demonstrating those agility skills, we might build the lesson around a game like cat and mouse, which requires minimal equipment in the current circumstances. And, a game like cat and mouse isn't something that we would just use this academic year because it doesn't use a lot of equipment. We could use it whether we were in the current climate or not, but What might change is the objectives and outcomes. So they might change from, for example, teamwork to a focus at the moment on the physical skill of agility. So just to give you a visual of what that looks like, I'm just going to show you a short video of our colleague Amanda delivering this activity so you can get an idea of what the game feels like.
Cat and Mouse. Key Stage 1 National Curriculum. Developing agility. We are learning to change direction. The session begins with Amanda, the teacher, explaining the game to the class with the help of 2 volunteers.
Our first game that we're going to do is going to be cat and mouse. You're going to work in groups of 3. You're going to have a cat, a mouse, and 1 person stood in the middle. Who chases who? Which animal chases which animal? Fantastic, the cat chases the mouse. All you're going to do is, if you come round, catch him, you're just going to tick him on the shoulder. After you've had a go each, the person in the middle will then switch out, come on over, and then you have another turn at that.
Working in 3s, each group collects 4 spots and finds a space to make a square. And the game begins.
3, 2, 1, off you go. Good, well done. Love that. Switching out? Are we switching out?
Having established the rules of the game, Amanda encourages the class to work on changing direction.
So I'm going to let you speak to the person sat next to you. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. What did you have to do that helped you change directions?
As well as individual interventions by Amanda, the whole class can share their own ideas and suggestions.
Do you run on the flats of your feet or on your toes to help you change direction? On your toes, brilliant, fantastic. Can you remember that for me? You're going to tell that to everybody else, okay? 3, 2, 1, off you go. Good. Change direction, yes, love it. Go on, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Work hard, work hard, work hard.
In this game, every pupil is engaged all the time. And as it progresses, pupils can be encouraged to make small adjustments and amendments, but with the focus remaining on changing direction.
At one point, you're going to have a little bit of a superhero cheat, okay? We have one time that you can cut across the middle of the square to try to catch him, but you can only do it once.
Amanda has observed the group and seen that a cat needs some help, so she has intervened to give them an easier task.
Yes, good lad, well done.
All right, so hopefully that gave you a little bit of a flavour of cat and mouse, and that might be a game that, you know, we build a lesson or a series of lessons around. And, you know, where the lesson or the unit of work goes beyond that will depend on your class. And like I said, we might play that for 2 or 3 lessons, introducing different constraints, different rules for different groups. Or, you know, we might put the skills developed into a bigger game, like the one on the right-hand side of the lesson plan there, where they might have to get from base to base using their agility skills to get past a defender. And, you know, it might be, and certainly something not to be afraid of, is that you might have 10 different versions of the game going on by the end of the lesson or by the end of lesson 3, where some might be playing the game that Amanda started with. Some might have the, you know, might need that little bit of extra support like Amanda showed, where they might cut across. Some might be using a ball, maybe bouncing. So, you know, don't be afraid for those, you know, have 10 different versions of the same game going on at the same time. And, you know, again, if we think about this in the context of one lesson, then at the end, to maximize that physical activity time, we might use a series of mini plenaries and reflections throughout the lesson, as opposed to sitting them all down again at the end for 5 minutes. Or we might even, you know, to really maximize that physical activity time at the moment, we might even get them to incorporate the PE reflections into a piece of literacy work later that day back in the classroom. And, you know, that lesson is just one idea to demonstrate some of the things that we've considered today. And hopefully it sparks some thoughts and some ideas around how we can really focus on developing those physical skills the pupils so desperately need at this time, without losing sight of the bigger picture of what high quality teaching and learning looks like, and in terms of shaping that longer term PE curriculum, which is specific to your school. And, now that we've seen an example, Will is going to look at how we can really bring that education part of PE to life in that particular context.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ryan. And Cat and Mouse is a great game, and it is really physically demanding for the children. Again, if you want to reduce the body contact, you could get the cat and mouse to swap roles on the cap of the referee. Again, when we're thinking about bodily contacts. So kind of moving into our final consideration when thinking about shifting our focus, and it might be around putting the education back into the physical by moving away from providing physical activity to delivering physical education. So how do we turn a good game like Cat and Mouse that feels like physical activity and entertainment to the children into an opportunity to allow us to physically educate the children, and in this case around agility? So I've mapped out a really simple process, which may be consolidations for some of you. It may provide a few ideas for others that will hopefully go some way into turning physical activity into a PE lesson. So Amanda in the video had the children playing in groups of 3, which ensured that the children were physically active for a sustained period of time. Again, this is part of the national curriculum. However, it also allowed her to use different types of interventions depending on the needs of the children. She could have done a whole group stop if there was a rule change or piece of information that the majority of the children needed. She could have done a small group intervention with a group of 3, depending on what their needs were. Or she could have done an individual intervention with a child who was perhaps needing some more further support or challenge when they became the referee, and this would have limited the disruption to the game for the others. In this case, I've chosen to do an individual intervention with one child who I've seen isn't recognising where the space is. I've pre-planned my questions and challenges within my planning, which has helped me to focus my observation throughout the lesson. So I'm going to really focus on these areas. And as soon as that child becomes a referee, I would look to ask them my question of why might it be important to look for the space? I'm hoping this might prompt the child to start thinking about looking for space when they return to the game. I've purposely then got them chosen to get them to record their answer on a personal whiteboard, as it lends itself better to maintaining social distance between both myself and the other children. It also gives that child some clear thinking time without my presence or pressure, and allows me to continue circulating other groups and observing for those that need further support or challenge before I return to that whiteboard at a later point to check the answer. Equally, I might use this exact same intervention, so individual with the question around space and the whiteboard, for a child who is actually recognising where the space is and doing it really well. And I do it just to check their understanding as to why they're doing it. And then throughout the lesson, I might use any combination of these interventions, questions and strategies in order to help support or challenge the children to develop their agility skills. Like I say, I know that is a really simple example, but this is possibly being forgotten or lost in the current climate, as for the right reasons and intentions, PE is being used to get the children physically active, but not necessarily physically educated. And if PE isn't something you are particularly confident in delivering, then I've seen simple processes like this printed on little cards that teachers carry around and can refer back to as a reminder when in the heat of the battle of delivering PE, as I like to call it. So hopefully that's helped, and we're now going to go back to Chris and James to pick up some of your thoughts in the chat box and share any of their further insights.
I think just as Chris and James are coming back in there, Will, I think something to pick up on there on that last slide is really the power of your interventions, isn't it? And I'm sure that all of us as teachers have been guilty of stopping a whole class when really we might only be speaking to a few of them. And particularly at this time when we want to maximize as much physical activity opportunity as possible within a PE lesson, if we think of that game just as an example that we've seen of cat and mouse, it's can we just go around and speak to the groups individually for 10, 20 seconds without stopping the whole class, so everybody else can be carrying on with that physical activity. And I think that's a really powerful tool and certainly one that can really help with this of increasing that activity time.
It's absolutely key.
James, Chris, anything coming in?
Yeah, I've got a few bits from the chat box. Similar sort of things coming into what sort of Will's just been going through, really. John came up with sort of changing your lesson structure or lesson design, has been using sort of a station-based approach to move people around. to keep physical activity levels high, or a carousel approach, as it might also be known. But lots of sort of people putting in how they're changing the pedagogical practice. Less interventions from the teacher, so less stoppages, maybe more individual interventions with pupils or small groups rather than stopping the whole class. Quite a few people putting around pupil ownership. And I like this one. This was one that I found really effective when I was teaching, was doing the lesson introduction in the classroom, as opposed to in the hall when we're ready to go and the pupils are itching to get going. Maybe it's more impactful from a learning perspective as well, before you're in the hall and they're itching to get into that first activity. But one that particularly resonated with me, so thank you very much for this one, Leanne, was how physical activity is not replacing physical education. So she talked about, in addition to, which were the key words for me, in addition to her 2 PE lessons a week, she's been doing wake up, shake up type activities. I'm not sure if that's just first thing in the morning or whether that's in the morning and afternoon or before the start of each individual lesson. I'm not sure. But really like those ideas, and there's still thinking and brain activity as well, so it can have a positive knock-on effect in other lessons as well. So yeah, that was the one from me, in addition to PE, where physical activity is having
fantastic. And I think it's a fantastic, brilliant point that you've made there, Chris, and thank you for the contributions. Anything to add, James, at the moment?
I like there seemed to be quite a feel for exploration. So giving pupils this opportunity to explore fundamental movement skills, coming across, whether that be in the stations or through this pupil ownership. A couple mentioned about peer learning, which I thought could be quite powerful at this time. And yeah, I recognise some were saying about maximising activity time, which you were talking about, Ryan, earlier, around that kind of setting learning objectives in different ways, as opposed to wasting the 5 minutes that you might have in the PE lesson. And I noted one point around maintaining differentiated activities, because it is still physical education and we have to support and help pupils progress. So those were the points that I got.
And I think just if we can pick up before you come back in, Ryan and Will, I think that's the key point that James has just highlighted there. It's keeping the E in PE, but actually we've always advocated that, but now we might be just shining that light on the P in PE. But not losing that education piece at the same time. So it's making sure that we've got, and this is the difference between PE and physical activity or sport. It's that E, but in this case, we're maybe just shining a light on the physical element. But we're not just doing a boot camp or some sort of fitness exercises. That's all well and great. Do that in addition to your PE, which might also focus on the physical elements of the curriculum.
Yeah, I think that's the key point, isn't it? And thank you very much for everybody who's contributed in the chat box, because I'm sure you've learned far more from some of the things that have been shared along those lines from people who are on the webinar as you have from us. So thank you very much for sharing your ideas and contributions. Just to wrap things up, really, I'm going to go back to that the quote that I shared from AFP in terms of creating a curriculum that can adapt to the current needs and isn't specific to them. And hopefully some of the things that James and Chris have picked up from the chat box and discussed, and hopefully some of the things myself will have shared, and that discussion has provided the help to help you do that and consider how you might, in your environment, be able to do that based on your current PE curriculums. So just going to look ahead to part 2, and I'm going to pose you 3 questions for those who are joining us and everybody on the call today. So hopefully it's made you curious and made you think and consider things about that you're currently doing in PE. So I just want you to have a think. What are your school currently doing in PE under the current guidelines that you're working under, and why are you doing it? Might be based on some of the things we discussed around the current statistics around physical activity. So what are you doing and why are you doing it? And based on the conversations that we've had today, is there anything that you might want to change, modify, adapt, again, personally or within your school, which you might want to consider having listened to some of the things that we've talked about and some of the things that other people have shared who are on the call today. So we are going to pick those up on the 10th of December. And we're also going to look on the 10th of December at some case studies from schools as well to share with the audience about what's actually going on within the school environment. And hopefully, that has been useful. And, like I said, it is really generated some curiosity within you. And just to make you aware that the certificates and the presentation are now available to download in the handout section. So you can download those before you log off. I've also put at the top of the chat, I've also pinned to the top there a link to sign up for part 2 on the 10th of December if anybody hasn't had a chance to do that as yet. As Will said, this is our new Twitter handle just coming up on the screen now. And that is the best place to keep up to date with all the latest news and events from the FAPE team. And feel free, if you are on Twitter to leave any feedback or reflections and tag us in that on Twitter as well and keep those conversations going. And just a reminder that on the FA Learning YouTube channel, under PE playlist, you will be able to get the previous 8 webinars delving into all kinds of topics from holistic development, effective curriculum planning, managing difference within pupils. So feel free to go and have a look at that back catalogue as well. And all that's left to do is say a big thank you for joining us. Like I said, whether you've joined us straight from school or whether you've rushed home to do so, really do appreciate it. We look forward to hopefully seeing most of you again in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your contributions to the chat box.
Thank you, guys.